As we return to the hearing, I consulted with the city attorney, Mr. Harmon, and we've decided to allow the video to come in for the purpose of Mr. Hawkins' testimony challenging that.
All right, and I will tell the commission the part of the video, it's rather quick, and just to summarize it, you can see, it's my understanding, and Mr. Harmon can probably confirm this, and the chief could probably confirm it, anytime a Bowling Green City police officer activates their emergency lights, the in-car video goes back and captures 30 seconds before that. What you're going to see on here is a car making a right turn, I believe off of Kentucky onto Main Street, heading down towards 880, and the car is involved in an accident. You can just see that the camera's mounted, so you'll see the shaking of the car, and you'll see the aftermath of that. This was on, it's all on here. I think when it starts up, it was on 8/26/06 at 1:24 a.m.
August 26th of 2006.
Correct.
What time again?
1:24. It starts at 1:24 and 11 seconds. And I don't know that I can make that go all the way out, and I'm afraid to actually try that for fear of having to rebuffer.
And what we're looking at there, that building, to help us have
that building
context,
has now been torn down.
That's where BGMU bought that corner. The railroad track is to your right, is that correct?
I think that was, I believe that's right.
Okay, and we're
that
looking.
Building it was Hook Sound at one point. I think was, I believe.
Hook Sound where they hung the shark out, and this is
right.
looking down Adams Street.
It may be Adams, yes, sir.
Okay.
There will not be sound at the very beginning.
Unfortunately, course, someone just hit me at Clayton, man.
If you'd like to see it again, I can play it again now while we have it up.
One more time. Someone just hit me at Clayton, man.
accidental use of force while trying to do something else?
Yes, sir.
You stand by that?
Yes, sir.
The officer involved in this didn't even file a use of force report, correct?
I think we have a copy of the use of force report that the officer filed.
When did he file it?
I'm not sure.
How about, let me see if I can find the date in here. How about November 15th of 2006?
Could he show him the document, because he doesn't
glad to.
know?
I'd be glad to.
That might be helpful.
Will you hold that? I believe that's the use of force report. What's the date of that?
It's like the date of incident was 8/26/06, and the use of force report was filed 11/15/06.
So the officer involved in this didn't even file a use of force report. When is he supposed to file that by?
As soon as possible after the event.
And you would agree that as soon as possible is not 3 months later.
I would agree with that.
And this officer's punishment was counseling, correct?
I think that's what the documentation shows, yes. I think there was a retraining as well.
Not termination.
No, but I didn't take any part in the determination of fact or the imposition of punishment or any remedial training on this issue. I was actually preempted in that decision by a sergeant who acted inappropriately, who took it upon himself to make a determination of fact, who took it upon himself to adjudicate and impose punishment, who then carried out that punishment, which was counseling and retraining, and then he forwarded it through the chain of command to me, and I wasn't even aware of this incident until well after all that had taken place.
And who was the sergeant that acted improperly?
Khalil Flesher.
The gentleman who testified earlier?
This was when he was a very young sergeant before he was involved in training.
Who's Kevin Wiles?
Kevin Wiles is now Lieutenant Colonel. I think at the time he was probably a sergeant or a captain.
Captain Kevin Wiles, 11/15/06, correct?
I'll take your word for it.
And
if you'll notice on the, I don't know if you have a copy of the conduct form associated with that,
probably do.
but I think the conduct form clearly shows that I was outside of the decision-making chain on that particular event. Would I have and might I have made a different decision had I seen that video and been the one to impose punishment? I may have made a different decision, but I didn't have that luxury. I was not involved.
So you would have made a different decision, but today...
That I may have.
Right, but today you said that was an accident.
I know based on the facts of the case, I believe I know what happened in that case, and I think you're mischaracterizing what happened in that incident.
Let me ask you this. This Hispanic gentleman obviously had a wreck.
It appears he had a wreck,
With the
yes.
officer,
That's
correct?
That is correct.
And accidents happen, correct?
I agree.
And the officer got out and immediately drew his weapon and pointed it at him, didn't he?
It appears so.
Is that proper?
Given the totality of the circumstances, the officer being involved in the wreck, the time of night, location, which you've pointed out, time of day or night and location may have some bearing on how officers behave. Maybe in this situation, it was prudent for the officer in his judgment to do that for his own protection until he knew exactly what he was dealing with.
But he rushed up on this gentleman who was sitting in the car like this when he opened the door.
I couldn't tell that. But
You couldn't. Do you need to see it again?
no, but the commission has seen it. They can make a judgment on
Okay.
that.
And started screaming, "Get on the ground!" And then he jerked him out of the car and hit him on top of the head with a gun butt, didn't he?
When in fact, what is
That's
shown,
what we just saw, right?
well, I'm going to explain, I think, what we just saw that you would characterize as hitting on You're describing an intentional action. The officer, according to the documentation that you have, and there's no evidence in this video to dispute it, I don't disagree that it was let's call it bad form for the officer to try to remove the gentleman from the car with a gun in the officer's hand. I would argue that that is not what they're trained to do. The technique that the officer was using is called a straight arm bar, which your client suggests that she was using on Christy Gammon the night of the incident in question. The officer grabbed the driver by the wrist, which is the appropriate grip to get hold of for a straight arm bar takedown. He grabbed the driver with his left hand on the wrist. He pulled the driver from the car, and the next action in a strong armbar takedown is to put your hand on the offender's shoulder to push them down to the ground while pulling down with your hand that's on their wrist. He tried to execute that straight armbar takedown with a gun in his hand, which is completely inappropriate, resulting in hitting the driver of the car in the head, which we acknowledge caused the injury to the driver. There's nothing right about the technique. I think you're implying the motive was intentional, that he struck the driver in the head. I think it was accidental based on all the information that I have, based on a poor execution of a technique that is taught.
Okay.
However, I wasn't in a position to adjudicate this, so. Was
that gentleman a threat to that officer that night? I mean, was he kicking him or punching him or doing anything of that nature?
No, I think the video shows he wasn't kicking or punching.
Okay. And is this the investigative file of that incident?
Is it the complete investigative file?
On that incident?
Without having the original, I wouldn't know if it's the complete investigative file, but certainly this is part or much of it.
You're the chief, so...
I don't know every piece of paper that we maintain at the police department, so I would have to review our master copy, but it looks like you have what would be reasonable, given the circumstance that I'm aware of, that this would be the proper documentation.
So was this Sergeant?
Sergeant Khalil Flesher.
Was he disciplined?
No, but we did take corrective action as an agency. I issued a directive clarifying, because this was not right from the beginning. His supervisor did address it with him in terms of correcting his behavior, but this was his captain at the time addressed it with him to make sure that it wasn't done again, but I also issued a directive to all the supervisors to make sure that they understood that the proper procedure was to, if a conduct form was initiated, that I was the person that would receive that and make some determination on the proper course of action, whether that be further investigation or any disciplinary action that may be necessary based on the facts.
Was anyone else in the chain of command called out on the carpet for this? Wiles?
Not that I'm aware of.
So this officer didn't report it, and you've read this. He didn't report it. When he watched it, about a week later, he watched it and he said it looked bad, so he didn't report it, right? He tried to hide it.
I don't know that he tried to hide it. He didn't do his paperwork in the proper time, which frankly happens sometimes. The police officers don't do their paperwork on time.
They do it in 3 months, though, right?
If they remember to do it. I mean, there's been occasions when officers have forgotten to do paperwork, but yeah, 3 months is certainly a long period of time before you do your paperwork. But again, this was all adjudicated without my knowledge and without my consent.
The danger of officer's actions were discussed in detail to include the stress that he was under during the incident. While the officer's stress level does not excuse his actions, it may explain why he does not remember using force against Mr. and it's redacted. During our meeting, officer stated he reviewed the tape about a week later and became aware that he used force and it was not documented. Officer admitted that he knew he should have completed a use of force report but did not complete one because, quote, it looked bad, close quote. Does that refresh your memory of what happened?
You can read it all, and I will agree with you, but again, I was not in a position to make a decision about discipline on this matter.
But you were aware of this video before you testified earlier, and you said it was an accidental use of force while trying to do something else.
I think he was trying to execute a straight arm bar with a gun in his hand, which I don't think he intentionally hit the gentleman in his head. I think he accidentally hit the gentleman in his head, executing a proper technique poorly.
And what was he doing over there wiggling around on the ground? You have any idea?
I assume he was trying to get him handcuffed, but I frankly don't know.
You don't know if he was punching him or not?
I have no idea.
Did you ever ask him?
This was adjudicated before I became involved.
Did you ever ask him?
I didn't.
Okay. He did not receive a demotion or reduction in pay or any kind of suspension without pay, correct?
It was adjudicated before I got involved in it.
So is the answer to my questions, no, he received none of those things?
He received none of those things.
All right. I don't have any further questions. I would move admission of this file under seal, but for the commission's review. It may have some personal identifiers of the officer involved that don't need to be released publicly, Social Security number and those kinds of things that address, and I don't think it's appropriate to put that in a public file.
All right. Do you have any further questions, Mr. Milliken?
Yes, and I would like to introduce the video as well.
I presume that's part of it. I apologize.
Well, it's part of the record, but if you want to be able to view it, if you deliberate.
Chief, you said a couple of times that was the punishment on that incident was determined before you knew about it, and I guess you had to live with it at that point. Can you explain that a little bit further, what exactly you mean by that?
We at the onset of this proceeding many hours ago, we talked about the Kentucky Revised Statutes that are known in law enforcement as the Police Officers Bill of Rights, 15.520 and 95.450. Excuse me. The reality is, as an agency, as a city, we only get one bite at the disciplinary apple. And the KRS is put into place to protect officers' rights within the disciplinary framework. And because discipline had already been determined and imposed and accepted by the officer, I had no choice, and I didn't like it in this case. I was furious as chief that it had happened, but I didn't have any choice but to accept it because I didn't have the ability to go back and reimpose additional punishment because it had already been completed.
No further questions. Thank you.
This officer's been promoted,
Which officer?
the officer involved.
No, sir.
Is he in the detective division now?
It's an assignment, not a promotion.
And then that's all the questions I have.
Does the commission have any questions for Chief?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Are we talking about the training officer that was here earlier or another?
Same officer prior to him being involved in training. This was when he was a young supervisor, and frankly, some of that probably comes from ignorance and his relative inexperience at the time.
So he was a sergeant prior to
Training.
his training?
That's correct.
I'll make sure I understand. The sergeant
Yeah.
Fletcher
The
here.
sergeant's not in the video.
That's correct. This is a different officer driving the car that got hit.
Okay.
Sergeant Fletcher was the sergeant who took disciplinary action in this case.
August of '06.
Prior to me becoming chief.
That's what I was going to ask you. You didn't come chief till when?
November 1st, 2006.
Okay. Anybody have any comments or questions?
So if you became chief after this incident,
Yes, sir.
what was your rank during the time of this incident?
I was a lieutenant colonel, deputy chief.
Okay, any other questions?
Just so we can clarify, he wasn't the chief when it happened, but he was the chief when it came to light. Is that correct, Chief?
I was the chief when it came to light, but
Because
played no role in the decision.
I understand that. The use of force report was done finally after it was discovered. They made the officer involved do a use of force report.
It's my understanding the supervisor was randomly viewing video, which we do to review officer performance, and found that video while he was just doing a random review of officer video and brought it to the officer's attention, which I think is where the ball started rolling with respect to getting the paperwork done.
But you were chief when it finally came to light.
I was.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions for?
No, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Do you have another witness?
I'll rest, Your Honor.
Mr. Simpson,
I will call
we
Mr.
were.
Allen and get him in and out of here.
All right, sir. Yes. Mr. Allen's not on his witness list. Is he on ours? Yes. Mr. Allen, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Would you give us your full name, please?
James Edward Allen,
You can put your hand down now. What's your address, please?
1120 Payne.
Mr. Allen, I think Mr. Simpson has questions for you.
Mr. Allen, were you there on the night that there was a disturbance,
Yes, sir.
April 26th of 2014,
Yes, sir.
involving this officer and Christy Faye Gammon?
Yes, sir.
Would you tell this commission what you saw that night?
Okay, I was sitting on my porch because I live about 2 houses from where it was on 11th and Payne, where they was fighting at in the middle of the street. She'd been going all day round, wrapping up down the street. And,
Get you. I'm going to move this closer to you.
okay, so she'd been wrapping up down the street all day long, raising
she?
Cain. Crystal, what's her name?
Faye?
Crystal Faye.
And you knew her.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
And so when I heard all this commotion, I went down to where it was at, and she was raising the same with the officer, Officer K. And so Officer K tried to get her down, to quiet her down, so she started calling her names, Officer K names,
What she start calling her?
niggers and all this kind of stuff.
Okay.
So Officer K finally got her down on the ground and kind of got her handcuffed. And so she started kicking
Who started kicking?
her, Crystal Faye.
Okay. Who's she
And-
kicking?
She was trying to kick Officer K.
Okay.
So then she took and spit at her, and it missed her face, I think, and hit her on a uniform.
How many times did she try to kick the officer or kick the officer?
I think it's about twice.
Okay.
She was raising sand.
Raising the stink?
She was raising sand.
Raising,
She was out of it. She was out of it.
raising sand?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Old,
I haven't heard that one in a while.
old expression.
I got you. So then she started kicking at the officer and then spit on the officer. How quick did all that take?
It took about, I guess, about 2 to 3 minutes.
The whole episode?
No, not the whole episode. It took longer than that.
Okay. And then did you see Officer K strike her?
Yes, sir.
All right. And tell me what your thought process when all that happened was. What did you think?
Well, I mean, I had done the same thing when I was an officer. After you don't spit on me.
And kicked her.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You didn't see a problem with what happened out there that night?
No, sir.
All right. That's all the questions I have for you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Allen, Mr. Milliken may have some questions for you.
Mr. Allen, was Christy Faye handcuffed
Yes, sir.
and she was down on the ground?
Yes, sir.
And Officer K was punching her while she was handcuffed down on the ground?
Officer K just punched her once, I think.
Just once?
Yes,
Is that
I
all
guess.
you saw?
That's all I saw.
Is it possible she could have punched her more than once and that was just all you saw?
I can't answer that.
That's what I'm saying. You don't really know how many times she punched
No,
her,
sir.
do you?
I just know one time. I seen one time.
You saw one time?
Yes, sir.
Any question in your mind that Christy Faye was down on the ground on handcuffs,
Yes, sir.
and her face is down there on the asphalt, right?
Yes, sir.
While she's being punched,
Yes, sir.
right? Had you had anything to drink that day?
No, sir.
No? Okay. And you live right there across the street,
Yes,
or is that right?
Yes, sir.
That's all. Thank you for answering my questions.
Yes, sir.
He may be finally excused.
Mr. Allen, thank you so much. I know you spent all day out there in the hallway. That's the last question we have for you, and you're welcome to go home now.
All right, sir.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
We had intended to take a supper
it's a
break
great
at
time
6
to-
o'clock.
It's perfect.
And so we're ready to do that, and we'll return as, what time would y'all?
Make some determinations if I'm going to call any other witnesses other than
That'll be
Sergeant K.
fine. Is just 6:45 or 7?
Whatever you say, it's fine with me.
6:45 works for me.
Very good.
You going to El Mas o'clock?
We got supper here.
That's fine.
All right. We'll return at 6:45. Thank you. Back to the hearing. It's about 6:43 p.m. Mr. Simpson, I believe you're up for the next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, I would like to call. Your Honor, I would like to call Sergeant Danica K.
If you raise your right hand, you swear the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
Please have a seat. State your name and rank and business address, please.
My name is Danica Kay. I'm a sergeant at the Bowling Green Police Department, 911 Kentucky Street.
Thank you. Mr. Simpson has some questions.
How long have you been in law enforcement?
Just a little over 11 years.
Each of you have a little badge, nameplate, and it says your service since when?
2003.
2003. Who hired you?
Chief Bill Waltrip.
And tell us a little bit about your career in law enforcement.
Up until this, it's been great. I've taken pride in serving the community of Bowling Green, Kentucky. I was actually sworn in right here in this room November 3rd, 2003. Best day of my life. Life-changing experience. I've enjoyed it. It's been great. It's been a good career.
Are you married?
Not yet. I'm engaged.
You're engaged? And to whom are you engaged?
Wayne Boyette.
Okay. We've heard some, is he seated here in the courtroom or in the chambers today?
He's on the phone with his mother. He's right outside.
He's been here all day, though.
Yes, he has.
All right. We'll see when he comes back in. Tell the Board of Commissioners about your education prior to going into law enforcement.
I came to Western Kentucky in the fall of 1999. I majored in sociology. I minored in criminology and business administration. In my senior year, I was allowed to do a internship with the Bowling Green Police Department, which I applied several places at the time. I just couldn't turn down staying here in Bowling Green. I was treated well by Chief Waltrip and the administration, and I could have gone home where my family was.
Where's
in
that?
Nashville, Tennessee, making more money, honestly. But this department was such a great place. I chose to stay here and work here in Bowling Green.
Tell us a little bit about your day-to-day activities as a sergeant leading up to this day. What's a normal day for a police sergeant?
You check a lot of paperwork. You're not assigned to a specific district. You go the higher priority calls where the officers may need assistance. You make yourself available. You go to those calls. I answer a lot of phone calls in the meantime as well from officers. You may also get officer complaints, but at the same time, I'm still required to answer calls, complete reports myself, just as an officer would.
So sometime the the radio traffic, and when we see Joe Emmel's tweets about what's happening, sometimes that there are lots of phone calls that go on now that we all have cell phones. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So tell us the day or so leading up to this. Tell the commission what your work schedule had been.
This was on a Saturday. Friday night, I worked a regular shift from 2:15 to 1 in the morning. There were 2 details in which the police department is contracted through the city, or the details have been contracted through the city, so they're mandatory fill events. One started at 7:30, and that was the Run for Autism.
7:30 in the morning?
7:30 in the morning. I worked,
Saturday?
Yes.
Okay.
So I worked till 1 Saturday morning and was back. Briefing was at 7:30, so had to be at the station at 7:30. And then directly after that was the Humane Society walk, and I did that detail. And I was able to go home about 11:45, take a brief nap, so I have to be back on duty at 2:15 in the afternoon.
And did you report back to duty on time?
Yes, I did.
And what time was your shift going to end that night?
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock in the morning. Okay. Tell us a little bit about April the 26th, 2014.
It was one of the busier days that we had. It was one of the first pretty days. We had, there was a lot of special events going on, a lot of people out. It was on a busy day. You get a lot of, I need a unit to be en route. I need a unit to be en route to this. Well, that means everybody's busy and there's not a unit available. That's pretty much the way our day went. Sergeant Porter made an arrest, which with 2 supervisors, and me and Sergeant Porter actually went to a pretty severe domestic by ourselves, leaving no other supervisors available, and he had to make an arrest. I worked a lengthy domestic earlier that started as just a minor rear end on Interstate Drive and resulted in us having to investigate, sending our units to the county. We had to investigate, remove a child, do a standby, which I completed all that paperwork. I was the lead officer on that day, which was a dual JC3, which is even more uncommon than your standard domestic.
JC3 is a form that you have to fill out in domestic violence situations?
Yes. On top of preparing pictures and stuff to be prepared for the cabinet the following business day, so they have what they need. So it was that kind of day, and Sergeant Porter was actually still at the jail lodging his suspect when I was dispatched to Payne Street. And I was, after we got Sergeant Porter's domestic taken care of, my intentions were to try to get to the station. I have to check all the reports that are done by the officers, along with finish my report, because this is my end of the work week per se, shift change. So I was going to be off till Tuesday, the following Tuesday, which was the 29th.
So if you describe this day on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the busiest you can be, 1 being a pretty slow day, where would you put this day?
It was a 9.
It was a 9. Were there enough units really to comfortably cover everything?
No.
Okay. So you're back at the station, and I'm not going to replay the audio, but you got the call, correct?
I did.
You weren't asked to go, you were dispatched to go, correct?
Absolutely.
Does that mean that you were the only unit available?
Yes.
Okay. And tell us what the thought process is when you get a call to 11th and Payne Street.
It is a high-risk area, and you're on, what's the word I want to use? You're at high regard. You need to be very aware of your surroundings.
Why is it a high-risk area?
It's a lot of heavy drug activity, and we had an officer get in a foot pursuit and injured in the same area with some of the same subjects. We had special units out there making drug arrests, arresting people. It was already a priority area for us anyway because of the troubles that we had, the increased drug activity and the increased disturbances that we'd had over there. So I was already on a higher alert anyway, knowing that I'm responding by myself, and the first officer that was backing me was a District 40 unit, which is across town. I'm not sure where she came from, but I know that it was Baker 49.
Which is Michelle Owen.
Michelle Owen, yes.
Okay. So you know that when you hear that she's backing, you don't know where she could be.
No.
What would her area include?
It would include from Fairview up the bypass to Broadway, all the way over through Bentry to Lover's Lane and the Steeplechase area. It's a very large area.
Okay. So you didn't know if she was on the outskirts of that, or she could have been downtown for all you knew.
Exactly. The radio traffic, as y'all heard earlier, was so scrambled when she said she'd be en route. I never heard where she was en route from. I just knew it was Baker 49.
Okay. So you go down there and you're on your own. Tell us where you parked and how far you parked away from where you first encountered Miss Gammon.
I approached from 11th Street before Payne, between Payne and Clay, maybe. So there's Studio One apartments there, and there's some one-level apartments off to the side. So I stopped, and I blacked my car out. I mean, I turned off the lights and walked up because of the type of call. You don't want to drive in the middle of it. And I walked up to the call where the disturbance was. There was a lady standing in the front yard. I would say it's probably 1100 Payne Street, and directed me towards Miss Gammon. And as I approached Miss Gammon, and in the intersection of Payne and 11th, not only could I see Miss Gammon coming towards me, who was very intoxicated, distraught, obviously had been in a disturbance, but at the same time, going on behind 1101 Payne Street, I hear doors slamming and a bunch of glass breaking, and it's just constant boom, 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 and the glass, and it's just glass shattering. That's what I could hear. I'm by myself. Miss Gammon approaches me, so I choose not to break the barrier and go around the corner because I don't know what's going on.
You don't know if there's somebody back there with knives, guns. You just don't know.
Exactly, because the people outside were still directing me that there was a disturbance that direction.
So you see Miss Gammon coming towards you, and describe to the commission what occurred.
As she approached me, Miss Gammon she had like one sock on and a shoe. She had obviously already been in a physical altercation because she had physical injuries. It could have been, at the time, old blood or a bruise. I couldn't tell because it was dark. She had dry blood on her shirt and an old bandage that looked like it had been kind of bled through. She was very belligerent. Her statements weren't making sense, and as she approached me, I asked her to sit down on the curb and explain to me what was going on. She continued to cuss at the individuals at 1055 Payne Street, I believe. That's where they were beginning to convene. And she would direct her profanities back towards 1101, and then she would direct profanities towards me. I was by myself. I let her rant for a while and cuss, but it went on, and she continued to direct it towards the citizens. That's when I gave her her first warning, that you need to stop cussing, you need to be quiet, and tell me what's going on. She ignored that request. I told her again, and that's when she replied, "What are you going to do? Arrest me for disorderly? I ain't scared." And I said yes, but I let that comment go because I'm still by myself. I don't know where backup is. But at the same time, Miss Gammon is escalating during all this. She's still escalating. So, little time goes on. I tell Miss Gammon, all right, because she's not obeyed orders. She is still cussing, causing a disturbance to the public. That's when I told her to stand up. You're under arrest.
You clearly gave her that direction. You told her she was under arrest.
Yes.
Did you tell her what it was for?
That I can't recall if I told her it was for disorderly conduct. I told her to stand up, and she didn't. I said, You need to stand up. She did.
Are people calling her Christy Faye at this point?
Yes.
Okay. So you
Christy
know
Faye-
you're dealing with Christy Faye
Yeah,
Gannon.
Christy Faye, do what the officer says. So she finally decides to stand up, but she jumps up in an aggressive manner towards me, but then immediately turns and puts her hands behind her back. Okay. I'm going to be able to cuff her and sit her down till I get some units, and we'll go on.
What are the people in the neighborhood doing at this point?
They're all just convening around. They're, the Mr. Allen and Mr. Campbell are approaching at this time.
It's like
Christy-
a car wreck. Everybody's coming to watch.
Yes. Yeah. Christy Faye, calm down. Do what the officer says. As soon as I make physical contact with Miss Gammon, she begins to pull away. And I was able to, as she pulled her hands away, I was able to somewhat grab control of her right hand and do a modified version of a straight arm bar takedown. But I didn't get full control of her right hand. So as we went down to the ground, I lost control of her right hand, which caused her to fall down.
So you're just, at this point, on top of her?
Well, I'd let go because I don't want to fall down myself.
Okay.
And as I let go, she rolled over, and that's when she made her first attempt to kick me in the chest. And that's the one that did make contact with me. She was intoxicated enough that she telegraphed it, per se. And I was able to keep that from knocking me off my balance. That's when I kind of just jumped on top of her at that point and put her in cuffs the best that I can. But when I got on top of her, it was like riding her. She was fighting, and I was just like riding a bull. And I was able to get her in cuffs, and I put.
Was she on her back or on her stomach when you were riding her like a bull?
She was on her stomach.
Okay.
Pushing, and I pushing up, and I was able to wrestle her hands in the handcuffs. And I wasn't able to double lock them. But as I was on top of her, as I got the cuffs on and my body weight was on her, that's when she alleged that she was pregnant. In which I immediately took my body weight off of her and turned her around and set her up. At this point, yes, I did disengage contact with Miss Gammon because I can't hear the radio for one, and that's when I called in custody and asked for MedCom, so I could hear and get on the radio.
Why did you call for MedCom?
I called for MedCom because she had been in a disturbance beforehand, obviously. And she was acting irrationally, possibly on synthetics. And all through this, it's been stated that she had excited delirium. That was just a concern of mine because I didn't know. She was not showing signs of excited delirium. And that's why I wrote that. She wasn't in any state of excited delirium, but...
You were concerned she was going to go in.
Exactly. So...
And she had told you she was pregnant.
And she told she was pregnant. And, we had gone to the ground, so I called for MedCom.
Okay. So she's sitting on her bottom, you're standing up on your radio.
Yes. And she's not a 5-year-old throwing a tantrum. She is kicking violently. I've got 2 citizens that, in some cases as an officer, you don't run away your help, because at that point, I think I needed it. They were trying to calm her down. So she's kicking violently, and it crosses my mind that if she does make contact with me, she's going to blow out my ACL. That in a split second. Now, every time that I approach Miss Gammon, the first 2 times, I did approach her from the back side and set her up. The 3rd time that I approached her, Mr. Allen and Mr. Campbell were blocking that direction. They were not flanked on each side of her. They were behind her. And I made the decision to approach her, and it's one of those things that I approached her from the front, and this is a bad idea, but it's too late. And that's when she turned at me and looked at me in the face with, it almost looked like a demon. And it was an intentional, I'm going to spit on your face. And she did that. At this point, yes, I know Miss Gammon is 1060.
Did you know what 1060 she had?
No, I did not know exactly, but I knew it wasn't lice. It was a communicable hepatitis or AIDS. I knew she didn't have lice. So,
Let me stop you for a second. Now, she spit at you. Was she still kicking at you at
she
that
was
point?
still violently kicking because she was rearing up. She was using the cuffs as almost as a leverage to rear back and kick.
Like a seesaw?
Yes.
Her hands were behind her?
Yes, she
rearing
was
back?
getting leverage. And just because you're in handcuffs, that doesn't mean you can't grip the ground and kick, which is what she was doing.
So she's kicking.
Yes.
She spit at you.
Yes.
What did you do?
When she spit, I made the reaction, and I'm down like this, and I'm already in close proximity.
Were you trying to prevent her from spitting again?
Yes, because not only do I have to protect myself, there's 2 citizens standing there that I also am required to protect as well.
Were you concerned for that point for your physical safety, not just from the spitting, but from the kicking?
Absolutely.
I object to leading.
I was concerned for my physical safety.
Why? Why were you concerned for your physical safety?
Well, number one, I've been assaulted by a subject in handcuffs from the rear before.
Tell the city commission about that.
I was taking a young lady into custody. There were 2 officers on each side holding her still. I was placing handcuffs on her directly behind her, as it's been said that I should have been doing here, and she headbutted me. And not only did she chip my tooth, but there's doctor's records. It separated the palate of my mouth.
That was the lady I mentioned earlier
Yes.
that I actually represented, correct?
Yes, and she was in handcuffs.
So you punched her. How many times did you punch her?
I am confident it was 3 times. And I punched her until she stopped resisting, in which I have been trained you use force to neutralize the threat. When the threat was neutralized, she was no longer being punched.
Do you believe that you used any unnecessary force or violence in trying to control her?
I absolutely do not believe I used any unnecessary force or violence.
Do you believe that she was an ongoing threat to you and maybe even other officers at that point?
Yes, she was.
You knew others were coming.
Yes, and Officer Owen says that she was there, and it was said that I should have used my tools to look around. I was not aware that Officer Owen was on scene until she was on top of me, like removing Mr. Campbell. That's the first time my knowledge of Officer Owen's presence was there. And when she got there, I stepped away because the situation behind 1101 Payne Street still has to be addressed, because it hasn't been at this point.
Let me stop you for a second, Sergeant. You were right there on top of her, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Milliken has suggested that you were holding her by her hair with her head pushed down on the ground and you were pummeling her.
I object. That was not me. That was witness testimony, Terry Campbell.
There's been testimony that you had her by the hair, holding her head down, and were just beating her.
Every allegation of me pulling Miss Gammon's hair and beating her and shoving her face into the pavement is absolutely false. I never touched her hair, and I never plummeted her head into the pavement. That never happened.
How hard do you think you hit her?
It was just enough to neutralize. I mean, I had a lot more to go, if that's...
More of a stun?
Yes.
Did she quit resisting?
Yes, she did. Briefly.
And then Officer Owen was there.
Yes.
And essentially she took control of her so you could catch your breath and assess what,
Yes.
other threats?
Yes.
Now, how many people are outside at this point?
It's every bit of 15 to 18, hands down.
What was your next step at that scene at that point?
To address what on earth was going on behind 1101 Payne Street when I got there, because you still have to make sure you don't have another victim.
You had heard the radio traffic that we heard here today.
Yes.
There was a discussion that there were several people fighting and there could be knives.
Yes.
Okay. So what did you do as a sergeant at that point?
Well, I went and assessed the
I mean,
scene.
you got Porter, Biddle,
Yes.
and all these other people there, right?
Yes, and Porter was there very briefly. And I went, as a sergeant, I have to make sure, did we establish what happened here? Are the necessary reports being done? As far as the initial incident, what happened to the original victim? Making sure proper photos were taken. Because I'm still in control of the scene as a supervisor, but I had to step away and do supervisor duties when I left Miss Gammon in the custody of Officer Owen.
Did you ever tell anyone from the MedCom, the ambulance service, the EMTs, don't worry about her, you can go on and leave?
No, and the only thing that I recall EMT Puckett asking me directly is if I was okay. And I told him, yes, I am okay. And that's when I asked for the cat side.
And that's the wipe to get the
yes.
chunk of...
Yes. And I had an encounter with Officer Puckett after coming back from assessing what was going on behind 1101 Payne Street. In my error, assuming that when I had spoke with EMT Puckett, that they had already assessed Miss Gammon. I was wrong in that assumption, and I didn't ask Officer Owen because I assumed Officer Owen knew this is why they're here. Dispatch did cut me off, and they never asked because, once again, as you heard the radio traffic, nobody stopped talking in the middle of my altercation. Radio traffic was continued to go on. Even after I said this chick is resisting, there was no regard, and they were still allowed to talk over the radio. And I never was asked who it was for over the radio. And so when I came back from assessing the situation behind 1101 Payne Street.
So you went around behind there?
I didn't go all the way, I went over to the back, in the backyard.
Other officers actually went around behind?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in the backyard, touching bases with the officers there. What's going on? What do we have? That's when we established that our initial victim was gone. The residents at 1101 Payne Street said that Miss Gammon and her boyfriend came over there causing a disturbance. They threw a brick through the window. And there were subjects that were injured at 1101 Payne Street but refused to have a report. So they injured other citizens before this happened.
You didn't know that when you came up, though?
No, I had no idea.
Fair enough. So when you came back from that situation, and I think you may have said this, but you wrote in your report that she refused medical treatment. How did you arrive at that conclusion?
It was an assumption from Officer Owen being there, and they left, and she went ahead and transported her.
You agree that with the chief that you should offer medical treatment if someone's injured?
Well, absolutely. I never would have called MedCom and then and told them to leave without purposely sending them away.
So you assumed that Officer Owen was doing her job?
Yes.
Which turned out to be not the case.
Exactly.
But you didn't know that until this all started?
Right.
Okay. So you were on scene after you pulled away from her and Officer Owen took control of her. How long were you still on scene after that?
Roughly 5 to 7 minutes. I would have to look at the CAD notes.
Okay.
But we weren't on scene long. And Miss Gammon was not laying in the road for an abundance of time. The reason why I actually told Officer Owen to let her sit there is because I knew she needed to be treated by MedCom. So, and neither one of our cars were where Miss Gammon was. So if MedCom has to see her, well, why are we going to pack her up and put her in the car? So I told Officer Owen that as I was leaving to address the situation behind 1101 Payne Street. You know, let her sit here till they look at her, and we'll put her in the car.
All assumptions you were making.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Fair enough. All right, so you stay there for a few minutes. Who transported Miss Gammon to the jail?
Officer Owen,
And how quickly after Officer Owen got there did you get there?
minutes, probably 2 to 3 minutes.
Okay. And what did you do when you got to the Warren County Regional Jail?
I made sure that the medical staff, because we were in the light, once we got in the light, there was more blood on Miss Gammon than I could see out in the field. So they came in.
Let me ask you this.
I'm sorry.
Was she bleeding from where you hit her?
No.
Okay. Go ahead.
No. So we had them assess her injuries at the jail. The whole time at the jail, she never asked to go to the hospital. She never showed any signs of excited delirium. Her blood pressure was obviously not elevated because they didn't refuse her. And right now we have a pretty high refusal rate with the jail. You know, rightfully so if they come in with elevated levels and things. So they accepted her. But I made sure that she was treated at the jail. And Deputy Ennis was not there when Miss Gammon was first seen by the medical staff. Medical staff was seen with Miss Gammon when I was there with her. I had left when Miss Ennis came on scene, when she came on duty. That's why Miss Ennis never saw me.
Who took the photographs of Miss Gammon at the jail?
I did,
Why?
to document for my use of force as per Bowling Green Police Department policy.
And did Captain Robinson come in at some point?
Yes,
And what was the discussion you had with him about photographs?
he had to take photographs of her, and we had gotten her bandaged up, gotten her finger taken care of. But for him to take the pictures, they were going to have to unbandage her hand and re-expose the wound to take his pictures. So I offered, I've taken pictures of her injuries. I will duplicate you a copy to keep us from having to unwrap her finger. Because, I mean, the nurse had just wrapped it.
I missed something a minute ago, and I want to come back and catch it. Why didn't you tase her?
I did not tase her because she alleged that she was pregnant. And I do not feel comfortable doing that.
Why didn't you spray her with OC spray?
Because if I spray her, it's going to cause snot and more mucus. And I know she's 1060, which is a communicable disease of some kind. So I'm not going to spray someone to make them spit or produce any more bodily fluids.
Did you have a conversation with Christy Gammon at the jail?
Yes, I did.
Would you tell the commission about that?
I object to the relevance, Your Honor.
She apologized.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
At first, it was very abrasive. You know, typical. I get called out of my name all the time at work. That does not bother me. She, you know, initially was accusing me of being related to Mr. Reed, and that's why she couldn't get her check, and it was racial, and she used the word nigger several times, and purposely used it when a black inmate had to come in to have his booking photo taken. And I let that go on, and finally I told her, I said, Miss Gammon, you know, I'm engaged to a white man. Color does not matter to me. And it doesn't. It never has in this job, and it never will. And she looked at me. She said, you know, I believe you. And, you know what? I'm sorry. And I should have done what you said to do out there. And from then, our encounter was very cordial. And I'm one, when I leave the jail, I shake my inmate's hand. And there was no different when I left Miss Gammon.
Did you say anything to the crowd of people who were gathered there after she was finally wrangled up?
Yes.
There's been some discussion that you said if you spit on the police, this is what happens to you. What was actually said?
What was actually said, because we have a hostile crowd and they're upset with what I did. I did, in a very commanding tone, I said, if you resist and you kick and you spit at the police, we will fight back. And she was not under control.
Were you trying to get the crowd to disperse?
Yes, and trying to back them down.
There was more of them than there were of you all?
Yes, even with all 5 officers, we were still outnumbered by 10 or more.
You wrote your use of force report at what time after all the dust settled?
I was almost 2 o'clock, if not after.
After your shift ended?
Well, after it was supposed to end.
Okay. And so you write the report that night?
Yes.
Is being in an altercation like that and being, I guess, just that scene that night, is that something that, I mean, after it's over with, what's the kind of reaction your body has after it's all over?
You have an adrenaline dump. It's your adrenaline just dumps. You're very tired, lethargic. I mean, it's anytime that your stress level spikes and comes back down, your body's going to have a negative reaction.
You wrote your use of force report that night.
Yes.
And you read it since.
Yes.
And you told Major Bowles that it sounded bad.
I think the statement sounded worse.
The statement sounded worse?
Yes.
And you'd had a couple of days at that point even, right? Mm-hmm. So you understand why they investigated?
Absolutely.
Did you cause a serious physical injury to Christy Faye Gammon?
I did not cause a serious physical injury to Christy Faye Gammon.
Are you sure that you caused any injury to Christy Faye Gammon?
If I caused any injury to Christy Faye Gammon, it was minor bruising to the right side of her face.
Did you believe that your arrest was lawful?
Yes, my arrest was lawful.
And do you believe that you used only that much force that was necessary to effect the arrest and to maintain control of her so that she would not escape or
Yes.
cause you injury?
Yes, I did.
When was the first time that you actually had an opportunity to verbalize what happened to the command staff at the police department?
Approximately a month later, when I had my 48-hour interview with Major Bowles.
And you told Major Bowles during that interview essentially what you've told the commission here tonight. Is that right?
That's correct.
When you hit her, did she cry?
She was crying at the end of it.
Did she cry from getting hit, or she just crying?
When the lady that was assisting, that was sitting with her,
Trying to calm her down?
That's when she's crying.
Started to cry?
Yes.
You've been suspended without pay for how long now?
Since August 13th.
And they took your badge.
Yes, they did.
You want your badge back?
Absolutely.
Tell us about your desire to be a police officer.
I wouldn't have gone through this, and if I was wrong, I would have walked away on July 11th when he recommended termination. But I know on April 26th, 2014, Sergeant Tanika Kay was doing her job and I was doing what I had to do to protect myself and the citizens that were out there with me. My badge is very important to me because I've worked very hard for it. And that's why I want it back. I think I deserve it back. I think I've been through enough.
Was your striking Miss Gammon, I think you told Major Bowles you were like 50% emotional, 50%. Explain that to the commission, if you would.
Nobody in their right mind is going to be happy if they get spat on, whether you know that they're 1060 or not, because the simple being spit on is actually assault third, which we charge frequently. The Friday before this, I approved a report for an officer who was spit on for assault third, which is a felony. Restate your question, I'm sorry.
The emotional response.
Yes. So you're not going to be happy. So I can't say, well, I was okay with being spat on, because I wasn't. However, she was struck because she was not under control. I have been spit on before in this job. No incidents. The difference between this time and that time is that Miss Gammon was still not under control. She had on handcuffs, they were not double locked, and she was not under control. With the crowd gathering around and me in my position of authority, it is my job to get her under control, using the least amount of force and the best choice that I felt necessary at the time, which I felt like I did.
Anything else you want to tell this commission?
I just want you to, I want to reiterate, Miss Gammon was not struck because she spit on me. That is not why I hit her. I want to be very clear that she was struck because she was not under proper control. And just because you're in handcuffs and sitting on the ground does not mean you're under proper control. And that's all I have.
Mr. Milliken, do you have any questions?
I do, thank you. Officer K, on that last issue that you're talking about, in your use of force report that you filed, I'm going to get to it here in just a minute. Gammon continued to yell and kick. This was after you had her seated on the ground under arrest with her hands behind her back. Gammon continued to yell and kick. At this time, as I walked towards her while she was still in a seated position, she spit at me. The spit hit me in the chest pocket of my uniform and struck my uniform shirt. At this point, I struck Gammon on the right side of the face with a closed fist several times. Was that your statement?
That night, yes. Several meaning three.
Are you changing your statement now?
I am not.
Okay.
Several, the definition of several is three the last I checked.
That's your definition? That's what you meant by several? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Then in your narrative that you wrote that you wrote on, well, I don't know exactly when you wrote it. It's dated 4/29/14, which is after the fact. When we get right to that issue, you say, as I approached her, she spit a large amount of saliva on me. Even though Gammon was handcuffed and seated, she was obviously not under control, which is what you said. At this point, I lost all patience with Gammon. You're the one that lost control, weren't you?
Nope, I did not lose control.
You lost patience with her, didn't you?
May she finish her answer? This is not Perry Mason.
Don't claim to be.
Answer the question, please.
You said, I lost all patience with Gammon. and delivered an unknown amount, and this was after you'd had time to think about it, an unknown amount of closed fist strikes to the right side of Gammon's face, right?
And that statement I did. And if you'll go to Major Bowles' statement, I explained that statement in my 48-hour interview.
Well, that means when you say, I lost all patience with Gammon, that just means what it said. You lost your patience with her, didn't you?
That's the way it reads, but that's not what happened. And
Ma'am-
my error, I didn't proofread my.
Ma'am, these are your words, aren't they? You wrote this.
I'll take responsibility for that statement, in which I have. I don't need to. Which I did in my 48-hour interview with Major
You
Bowles.
lost all patience with her when she spit on you, didn't you?
No.
So you're saying your statement here that you made on 4/29/14, where you say, at this time I lost all patience with Gammon, you're saying that's not so.
And I explained how that was inaccurate in my 48-hour interview.
Well, I mean, I'm fairly good at the English language, and I think I lost all patience with Gammon and delivered an unknown amount of closed fist strikes to the right side of Gammon's
objection.
Hang on
face.
just a minute.
It's been asked, it's been answered. He doesn't like the answer, but it's been asked and it's been answered. It's
Are
just
you trying to
badgering.
elicit additional information?
My question is that accurate? You lost all patience with Gammon.
That is not accurate.
Then why did you put it in your report?
Do you want to know what I was doing before I had to write that?
Let me ask you another question.
Well, let her
I-
answer the
because I
question.
can
You
tell you.
ask why it's
Let's-
in there.
let's
Let her
ans-
explain.
let's
Sure,
answer the
why'd you put
question.
something in your report that's not so?
Tuesday morning, I get a phone call from Dave Weisbrot questioning whether I was exposed. And pretty much whether I was or I wasn't. And so as soon as I get on duty, I had to go to urgent care, where I sat for 3 hours to get my blood drawn for the doctor to, in fact, confirm that I was exposed to hepatitis C. Captain Harold asked me to write that as I left from to go to urgent care from the police station. I walk out of urgent care after being confirmed that I was exposed. We are busy still because I'm trying to be a good supervisor and get back on the street. I cranked out that statement, which is an error that I will take. That is my responsibility. I should have taken more time and I should have proofread it. The correct reading should have been, I lost all control, I lost all patience with the situation. That's what it should have said. That's why that's in there. And I explained that to Major Bowles in my 48-hour notice.
Okay. So you didn't just lose patience with Gammon, you just lost all patience with the situation, correct?
Yes, because she was not under control.
She's handcuffed on the ground, kicking and screaming and yelling, correct?
Kicking violently.
Okay, kicking violently, screaming and yelling. You heard Chief Hawkins. I want to ask you, why couldn't you just let her lay there and kick around? Why did you have to reapproach her?
Well, do I want her to let her continue to injure herself? Because if she's handcuffed and she's pregnant and she rolls over on her stomach, then that's where you will get excited delirium.
Okay. This excited delirium, you're the one that brought that up as
Exactly.
a reason for calling
I did.
MedCom, right?
I sure did.
And you're the one that called MedCom,
I did.
correct? And you failed to direct MedCom to Christy Gammon when they got there, didn't you?
I wasn't with them when they got there.
Okay. As the arresting officer, and as the officer that called MedCom to begin with, and as the officer you're the reason why they're there, it's your responsibility to have them check her out, isn't it? You can't pass that off to anybody else, can you?
I should have insured before they left, but I was doing a lot of other things. And I should have asked Officer Owen, did they look at her? But I didn't.
So do you admit that that was a mistake?
That was a mistake, yes.
Okay. You say you take pride in being a police officer.
Yes, I do.
Are you proud of punching that handcuffed woman down on the ground that night?
You're never proud of having to use force.
Okay. Did you enjoy punching this handcuffed prisoner down on the ground?
No.
You say that being a police officer has been great up to this incident?
Yes.
Okay. You went into some things about what you'd done the day before, or that day, and it sounds to me like you had a long day and worked a long shift. Are you suggesting to the commission that if you've had a long day or a bad day, that somehow or another that excuses how you carry out the policy of a police department?
No, number one, I don't feel like I violated the policy, but I need to paint a clear picture for the city commission because the initial investigation did not.
Okay. So were you tired that day?
Yes, I was tired.
And you told Penny Bowles, or Major Bowles, that you just lost all patience with Payne Street. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. You didn't want to get called out there because you were trying to get paperwork done, and you got called away, called out there to the disturbance, and you didn't want to have to go, and you were hoping it'd be gone before you even got out there, right?
Not hoping it'd be gone so I didn't have to do my job, but number one, hoping that I wouldn't have to deal with a fight, being a solo officer responding, and so I could get back to my administrative duties that had collected throughout the day. So yes, I wanted to get back and do my paperwork.
Were you voluntarily working extra shifts at that time?
I volunteered to work so others could be off.
Okay. But it had been a long day and you were tired.
Yes.
So when you punched her in the face, you say 3 times. Was she face down or face up?
She wasn't she wasn't all the way on the ground. She was still somewhat in a seated position from where she was kicking me. So she was able to still kick violently, so she was still upright. She was not laying on the ground when I punched her.
Where was her head when you were punching her in it?
It started off of the ground, like it started up, and then we went to the ground, and she went to the ground as the punches ended. Her face did not bang in the pavement.
So as you're punching her, her head is going down towards the asphalt.
And
is
she
that
is
correct?
still kicking.
And you just see nothing wrong with punching a handcuffed prisoner who's sitting in a sitting position kicking at you. You think that's acceptable practice to a handcuffed prisoner to punch her in the face 3 times?
In the situation that I was in that night and the decision that I had to make in a split second, I do not see anything wrong.
But you do admit that not taking the responsibility that was yours to have her seen by MedCom, you do admit that was wrong.
I admit that I should have confirmed with Officer Owen that Officer Owen did what I thought she was going to do.
Well, let me ask you this. If you had have confirmed with Officer Owen and Officer Owen would have said, no, they haven't seen her, what would you have done in that instance?
Called MedCom back to the scene.
Did any of the other officers talk to MedCom other than you?
I'm not aware.
Did you talk to MedCom?
I talked to EMT Puckett, in which I recall him asking me if I was okay, because he knew that I had obviously been in an altercation, and are you okay? I said, yes, I am not hurt. That's what I recall telling him. And that's the conversation that I recall with Officer Puckett, or EMT Puckett. Because had I clued in that he asked me, is anybody else hurt? Then I would have known he hasn't seen her, and I would have instructed him to go over. She needs to be checked out for the obvious reasons that we've stated.
But it's your affirmative duty as the arresting officer and as the officer that called MedCom to determine that, and you didn't do that, correct?
About the 3rd time that he's asked this question, at least.
And it'll be the last time she'll answer it.
Yes. However, when I took her to the jail, I ensured that her vitals were checked, It's a registered nurse at the jail. She got proper treatment at the jail. One could have been refused at the jail, and we would have went to the hospital. And at any point in time, had she said, I want to go to the hospital, I would have called MedCom from the jail, and we would have went to the hospital.
May I approach the witness?
Sir?
May I approach the witness, please?
With?
Sergeant K, I'm going to show you what I believe to be your use of force report with a narrative. Can you look at that and confirm that that's...
Can you use that microphone there, Tracer?
Can you confirm with me that that's in fact your use of force report?
Yes, it is.
Is that your signature on the back of it?
Yes, it is.
And what's the date on your signature?
April 29th, 2014.
Now I'm going to ask you to look at this, which has been reported to me to be your written statement. Is that, can you look at that and confirm that that is in fact your written statement?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I move the introduction of these two as petitioners' next numbers and exhibits.
They've already been introduced, I believe.
I don't know that they have.
I think he introduced them about 8 hours ago.
Katie, do we have her statement and
May I see
her
what
use
your-
of force already in evidence?
I believe that we just did Officer Owens' use of force.
I remember hers. I don't remember this one.
I don't believe that I attempted to put these in, but
Who wrote right thing on the
could
back?
be wrong.
Do you know who wrote that on the back?
I have no idea. It was Officer Owens that was previously introduced.
Okay.
These are Sergeant K's.
No objection.
So entered.
Next, I'd like to show you Officer or Sergeant K what's been provided to me as a timeline, and I want you to look at that and see and tell the commission if you think that's accurate.
It's not on a standard CAD sheet, but it looks right.
How long was MedCom there according to the timeline?
They arrived at 21:51, which is 9:51, and departs at 10:05.
Your Honor, I move
Did you ask how long they were on scene?
according to this timeline.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at the same thing she's looking at, and I think she looked at the time that they were advised.
Tell me, if you will, when it says that EMS was on the scene and when it says that they departed from the scene.
9:57 p.m. and they depart the scene at 10:05 p.m.
Right, I thought that's what you said. So they were there about 7 or 8 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah, it's quick subtraction, but yes, I'm right.
Okay. I move the introduction of this as petitioner's next numbered exhibit, Your Honor.
I don't really have an objection to it, but I mean, she didn't prepare that, so I don't know that it's truly accurate, but it was prepared by Major Bowles, I think, and provided in the summary of materials.
Okay. It'll be entered.
Do you think that's not accurate?
It's not in a standard format that we've got, but I have no reason to believe that it's not.
Who took pictures of you at the scene?
Sergeant Porter.
I'm going to show you 6 pictures and ask you to tell the commission if those are true and correct pictures of you at the scene and what they show there, Sergeant K.
There are 6 pictures of the spit on my uniform, and one of them, the whole front of my uniform shirt's dirty. Obviously, I'd been in an altercation. but that's there of me after, just shortly after this physical altercation.
Are they true and accurate, do you think?
Yes.
Do they, and this white right here on your, right by your pocket there, that's the spit that was on your uniform.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, yes it is.
Your Honor, I move the introduction of these as petitioner's composite, next numbered composite
No
exhibit.
objection.
So entered.
They're on the disc, but easier to look at that way.
I just thought it'd be easier to have the pictures. Then I'm going to show you two last pictures that I've blown up, and who's that in those pictures?
That's me.
Are those also pictures of you taken at the scene?
Yes.
Are those two of the same pictures that you just did?
No, I just blew these two up. It's
They're-
part of the same. It's part of the same.
Full body.
And those pictures show your whole face and everything, correct?
Yes.
And in this one picture behind you, that's the EMS that you called, right? There's the ambulance right there
Yes.
behind you.
Yes,
right?
it is.
So that must have been taken during the 7 or 8 minutes that they were there. That's when that picture was taken,
Yes.
right?
Sergeant Porter immediately stopped me when he saw that and took those pictures.
You say it was a bad night there and things were dangerous there that night?
Yes, sir.
You don't look like you're distressed in either one of those pictures, do you?
There were 4 other officers on scene, and I had stepped away from Miss Gammon.
So that's after you punched her while she was handcuffed down on the ground,
Objection. This is just,
right?
Your Honor, I mean,
He's
really.
just trying to do the same thing you are, so let's get it on with it.
Is
Well-
that correct?
That was after I struck her when she was not under proper control.
Okay. Handcuffed on the ground.
She was handcuffed, but she was not under proper control.
Are you smiling in those pictures, ma'am?
That's a grimace or a grin, because you don't look at a camera and frown. You know.
I move to introduce these as petitioner's next numbered exhibit. There's 2 8x10 pictures.
Are they the same as what you've already had?
No, sir.
Okay. Let them in.
So I'm just going to set this here. So the bottom line is then Sergeant K. You don't think you did anything wrong that night, do you?
Do not.
That's all.
Are
Do
you
you have
trained,
any follow-up, Mr. Simpson?
very short, are you trained as an officer to wait until you're injured to react to somebody?
No, you're actually trained to act before that happens.
And KRS 508025, assault third degree, says that a person is guilty of assault third degree when the actor recklessly, with a deadly weapon or dangerous instrument, or intentionally causes or attempts to cause physical injury to law enforcement, correct?
Correct.
And do you believe that Christy Faye Gammon was attempting at least to cause you to either contract a communicable disease or kick you and cause regular physical injury to you?
Yes, and she actually did make contact when she tried to kick me, so yes.
That's all I have.
Anything else, Mr. Milliken?
She was kicking at you the whole time, correct?
Yes.
It wasn't until she spit on you that you started beating on her, correct?
She was struck because at that time she was spitting and kicking, and I've got 2 people, 2 citizens, standing over top of her. I know she has a communicable disease. At that point, I have to stop her actions, and that's why she was struck.
Is it your testimony that you were also trying to protect those other 2 fellows that were there too then? Is that?
That is my duty as a police officer.
All right. Are there any questions from the commission? I have a couple. You indicated that why did you call EMS again?
because she'd obviously been in an altercation prior because she had injuries. That was obvious. She was under the influence of an unknown substance. There was concern of the possibility of excited delirium, and she was pregnant, or alleged that she was pregnant.
Okay. She's under arrest at the time that the EMS arrives?
Yes.
Do prisoners get to make the choice not to be seen if they're in your custody?
If they can refuse MedCom, yes, themselves,
Even if they're in your custody?
yes. Unless like we were to tase them, there's sometimes that you have to, or even if the injury is to a certain extent and MedCom says they have to go, then they'll have to go.
So you had presumed that she had refused treatment?
Yes, sir, because
And-
I was addressing the other issue and
Okay.
incorrectly assumed that Officer Owen had let them treat her.
Okay, then why did you ask the medical staff at the jail to treat her? If
Because she
refused
has to.
treatment there?
Any injury, because of the cut on her finger, and she was bleeding, she has to be, and her alleged of being pregnant, they have to see her.
Well, I'm confused. If she's
That's a
in,
jail policy. They're gonna call for medical.
I'm confused as to why you would let her refuse treatment, knowing that she couldn't refuse treatment when you got to the jail.
She can't refuse their initial treatment. She can refuse MedCom all day. But they have their policy and procedures to assess every person that comes through the door.
I have one additional question here. Why do you think Officer Owens walked up to you and said that's enough?
I never heard her say that.
Okay. Do you have any follow-up? Yes, sir.
Sergeant, had this same situation and the first on the scene, had it been a male police officer or sergeant, do you think that Mrs. Gammon would have acted like she did with you?
Yes.
She was
Yeah.
just that
Yes.
off.
Yes.
Anyone else? Are there any other additional witnesses to be
No,
called?
sir. That's our case.
Okay. Before we go into closing statements, I'll let you know that we'll give you about 15 minutes apiece. Is that sufficient?
I don't know.
Sure hope so.
I'll-
We're going to take about a
I never
10-minute
like being
break.
confined as a lawyer to say too many words, but I'll try to make them all count.
We'll be back at 8 o'clock.
Thank you.
For you to- Okay, as we come back into the hearing, under the original statement of charges, under count 1, it listed assault under KRS 508020, which is a second-degree assault, intentionally causing serious physical injury to another person. I don't believe the burden of proof has been met on that, and I'm going to withdraw that charge from being considered. And I know, Mr. Harmon, you're going to go and complete writing the instructions at this point. And if you'll bring those other documents by before you go, let me tell you, on behalf of this hearing, the city, each of us on the commission received letters, and I've read the letter that was written to me. Envelopes of the very same postmark, return address, handwriting were written to each of the commissioners as well, regarding this incident. I confiscated those letters, and they have not had an opportunity to read them. Some of them came from people in the audience here.
I was not aware of that.
If you would like for them to be considered, Mr. Harmon has them in his office, and I will bring them back over as well.
I'd like to look at them first, but trust me, I was not aware that happened. That anybody wrote any letters. That's the first I've heard of that. But
We were notified, Alan and I were both, Mr. Simpson and I were notified that there had been some letters written, but I haven't seen the letters or anything. But we received an email about it, that there had been some letters written. But that's all.
Gene says he may have told me in one of the meetings, but I'm not. I've never seen them. I'll put it that way.
I thought you had told him to include
He
the other one
may
too.
have in one of the meetings, but the meeting that we had at one point was rather short.
Okay.
I would like to make one other request.
Sure.
And it would affect what Mr. Harmon is going to do. I do not believe that under administrative charges that Sergeant K can be charged, and I think you have made the correct decision about withdrawing the charge regarding 508-020 assault second degree, but I further don't believe that it is appropriate for the City Commission to make a determination of a criminal statute, 508-030 assault fourth degree, unless the burden of proof is much higher. And quite frankly, I think the question that the city has to determine is whether or not the policy has been violated, not a criminal statute. So I would ask you to also, essentially, in a trial, I would ask the judge to direct a verdict. I'm asking you to withdraw that charge at this point. And I would also ask you to withdraw the remainder of the charges, because I do not believe that it would be reasonable for you to conclude, by preponderance of the evidence even, that she's violated any of the policies.
I understand when Mr. Harmon first wrote or whomever was forwarded me what the instructions would be, there was discussion about the KRS and the policy is based upon the KRS. If the KRS is not supported in a finding, then the policy would not be followed through. So I'll overrule the rules at this point, but note your objection. Anything else? All right. I believe, Mr. Simpson, you get to go first.
Drop this microphone.
Are you going to be at the podium?
I am, if I can.
Amir and Chris, if y'all can make sure this microphone's active, please.
Mayor and Board of Commissioners, as always, I thank you for your public service. You have a job that maybe you get paid more than $12.50. When a juror comes to court, that's what they get, but you've had to definitely earn your keep here today. Sergeant Danica Kay is an outstanding police officer. She always has been. Even Brian Harrell said she's really earned her keep. The city of Bowling Green has invested a lot of time and a lot of money into her training, and she has made the city of Bowling Green very proud. This case, quite frankly, scares me, and as I told you in my opening remarks, the message that finding that an officer who is defending herself in a violent, volatile, chaotic situation such as she was faced with that night, and we all know, and 3 of you on this commission have been police officers before, you have to make snap decisions that can take your life or take someone else's life or cause you a permanent injury or cause someone else a permanent injury. What I'm concerned about most of all here is that every other city police officer in the city of Bowling Green, if you believe that Danica Kay did something wrong and used excessive force, all the people that are sitting over at the Warren County Regional Jail right now watching Channel 4 are going to know, and the rest of this community will know, that it's okay to fight with a police officer because they really can't defend themselves completely. Danica Kay went over to an area that is a high crime area. She went by herself, and she was faced with a lunatic, crazy woman who she knew had a communicable disease. And I think it's disingenuous to suggest that somehow she thought maybe she had lice. You have to assume the worst when you're in that situation. She goes over there by herself, in the dark, in an area of town that is known for violence. She sees this lady, and I believe that the city actually agrees that everything she did up until the punch or punches was absolutely perfectly fine. She doesn't get credit for that. She told you she asked this lady to sit down. She cursed. She kicked. She wailed. She cussed other people. She cussed the sergeant. Sergeant still doesn't know where Baker 49's coming from. And she's out there, and she finally tells Christy Faye Gammon to sit down. She sits down, but then she keeps mouthing, and she keeps mouthing, and she keeps mouthing. She keeps escalating. People come out. It's a show. And she's put in the situation where she's going to finally have to arrest this lady because she can't let the situation get out of control any worse than it already is. And she does that. Miss Gammon jumps up aggressively and then turns around, surprisingly, and puts her hands behind her back, almost baiting Sergeant Kay into touching her. And as soon as she touches her, she starts fighting. She did the right thing. She finally, after she rode that bull, she got her handcuffed. And then she stepped away, and who called for medical help? She did. I want to touch on that first. She would have never called for medical help unless she thought it was necessary. And what she's accused of is lying about her denying medical treatment. This sergeant, after getting her under arrest and handing her off to someone else, has to assume that everyone there, including the EMTs, have some common sense. And that this lady is sitting there with bloody hand, either dirt or a bruised face, in handcuffs, acting crazy. That's the one they called for. She goes over with her other officers to see if someone's getting shot or getting stabbed or getting beaten to death behind the house. So yes, she's busy. Yes, she made some assumptions. But did she lie on her report about her denying that? No, she made an assumption, a wrong assumption. You heard the other officer was disciplined for not getting her medical treatment. Are you going to discipline the other officers? And that's where we get into this, are they treating everyone equal kind of thing? Because that becomes really important. Christy Faye Gammon was strung out on some portion of a gallon of vodka and synthetic marijuana and was acting crazy. This is not this demure woman who came in here today. She was having an out-of-body experience. She was trying to injure Sergeant Kay. No matter what anyone did, no matter people who knew her, Soup included, who I submit to you was drunk on his gallon of vodka, started drinking at 6 in the morning. She was getting ready to be a victim. And I hope this body doesn't tell police officers wait until they kick you really hard. Wait until they give you AIDS, and then you can take care of business. Because that's not what they're trained to do, and that's not what human nature tells us. You're going to protect yourself. Her human nature told her that night, I'm getting ready to get hurt by this woman, and I'm going to stop her before she hurts me. That's self-defense. That's what the KRS allows. If I walk up to someone and just punch them for no reason, that's an assault. But if I'm defending myself from being injured, and the legislature, in their wisdom, makes exceptions to the assault statutes for police officers, and you will have those definitions in your instructions, Sergeant K has a right to defend herself. And that's all she did. So let's review what evidence we've heard in here just briefly. Sergeant K turned in the use of force report. I submit to you that if she was going to intentionally lie, she wouldn't have written those use of force reports the way she did. She wouldn't have written out her written statement the way she did. To suggest that she lied, she got herself tied up in this mess because she wrote a terrible report and understands why they had to investigate this. But it's like they're going to look at the papers, but they're not going to sit down and talk to this lady that's been on the police department for 10 years and just say, Danica, what happened? And when they finally did a month later, she told them this lady was trying to hurt me. Why didn't they assign this to someone else who could have gone out there in a day or two and said, what happened? And I realize they've got to give her 48 hours notice and all those kinds of things. That's fine. That's 2 days. It's not 3.5 weeks. So she tells Major Bowles, this is what happened. And Major Bowles almost read to you the entire 17-page statement when she was testifying here today. And consistently, Sergeant K said, she was kicking me, she was trying to injure me, I had to eliminate the threat. Now, Mr. Milliken has had every opportunity, I guess, to try to portray this as Rodney King round 2. That's just not, it's not even close. Danica K was concerned for this woman because she told her she was pregnant. So she didn't want to tase her and watch her fall and break her face. She didn't want to spray her with OC spray because she already knew what that would cause. She didn't knee her in the side of the leg because she wasn't walking. She ended the threat the only way she could end the threat at that time. I suppose it would have been okay if she had whipped out an asp and started wailing on her. That wouldn't be a punch. But when Sergeant Flesher started testifying, he talked about the use of force continuum, which you have, and they want to make it sound like she went, just below deadly force. And that's not on the continuum that way. It's number 7 out of 13. And it's funny how the police department wrote that up. It's very eloquent. It doesn't say punches. It says heavy techniques or something. I understand that. We're all politically correct in 2014. But when you get right down to it, if somebody's getting ready to take you out, somebody's getting ready to punch you and injure you, you better take care of yourself. And that's all that Sergeant K was doing that night. She had a mob surrounding her. And I'm thankful that she is protecting the city of Bowling Green the way she has and the way she will in the future. Funny things always happen in hearings. Funny, maybe not funny, ha-ha, but funny, weird. And it struck me when Sergeant Flesher said, when Mr. Milliken asked him, is it ever okay to strike someone when they're in handcuffs? And I will bet you $1 million Mr. Milliken never believed that Sergeant Flesher was going to say, oh, yeah, it is sometimes. And then the chief says, I never tolerated excessive use of force. And I asked him about the incident. Well, that was accidental. And we saw the video twice. Thank you, Commissioner Hill. If that's an accident, I'm 7 feet tall. That was not an accident. That was excessive police brutality. And the whole department knows about that incident. And the chief didn't say the buck stops here. The chief said, oh, I didn't have anything to do with that. That, they got handled before I even saw it or knew about it. But let's compare these things, because he wants you to fire Sergeant K. Sergeant K has somebody kicking and screaming and spitting, and he wants to fire her. And the other officer who clearly, at gunpoint, jerked a subject out of a car who wasn't under arrest and hit him on the head with a gun butt, and then doesn't report it because he knows it looks bad. Gets counseling. It is beyond me. It is beyond me. Sergeant Danica Kay didn't lie to her superiors, and she did not use excessive force against Christy Gammon. And I said it before, and I'll say it again. If you want your Bowling Green Police Department to be afraid of doing their jobs, find her guilty. Let her go. Because they will be afraid to ever use force. What you're going to have is you're going to have a bunch of people getting tased. You're going to have more electricity flowing through Bowling Green than you know what to do with. They'll put BGMU out of business. Or they'll whip out their ASP, or you'll end up with people standing back and getting shot. When every once in a while, a police officer has to get down in the trenches and punch somebody, it saved lives. And what Danica Kay did that night will save other people's lives, both citizens, and it will save officers' lives. So on behalf of Danica Kay, thank you very much. And I will tell you, you simply cannot believe that what she did that night was an excessive use of force or a violation of any one of these statutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Thank you for staying within the time limit. Mr. Milliken.
Thank y'all for being here all day. I'm a little more wrinkled this evening than I was this morning when I gave my opening statement, but the facts of this case have not changed from this morning. The relevant facts of this case are that Sergeant Danica Kay beat a handcuffed prisoner in the face with a closed fist several times while the prisoner was down on the ground, and further denied the prisoner medical care after having called EMS to the scene. The facts are further that she did falsely reported that Gammon had refused treatment when Gammon was clearly not competent to refuse because she was out of her head drunk. And that's never been disputed, that we were dealing with a belligerent, incoherent person. Police officers are trained to deal with that. Nobody likes to get spit on. I wouldn't like to get spit on. But police officers are held to a higher standard than the rest of the public. They have to hold themselves to a higher standard. They can't lose their patience and go off and punch handcuffed prisoners. Mr. Simpson's telling you what message you're going to send to the police department. Well, do you want to send the message that it's okay to beat a handcuffed prisoner down on the ground if they're belligerent and they're kicking and they spit on you? Is that the message that you want to send, that it's okay to beat handcuffed prisoners who are down on the ground? I don't think so. Sergeant Danita Kay doesn't even see anything wrong with what she did. She feels like she's justified in beating her for being spit on. It wasn't until after she was spit on that she started beating on her. She was kicking at her the whole time, and that's been the testimony from everybody. She clearly, and she admitted, made a poor choice approaching her from the front. Nevertheless, that occurred. The conduct that violates the statute and the policy is beating a prisoner who's handcuffed down on the ground like she did. Sergeant Kay doesn't see anything wrong with that. You have to tell her that was wrong, because it was wrong, because that violates the policy. That is unnecessary force. She wants you to believe that she was doing it to try to protect those other two fellas that were standing there. I don't think anybody believes that she thought they were in any peril, and she wouldn't have been in peril herself had she not approached from the front. So, like I said, the facts haven't changed. That's the simple facts of it. And as the officer who arrested her and who called EMS, she was the one that was responsible, and she did at least admit that she made a mistake there. That was her responsibility. She was a sergeant. She's not just an officer either. She's in a supervisory position. And she failed in her duty to get that person that she had taken into custody, medical care there at the scene, after, they say, well, she was concerned about her, and it's evidenced by the fact that she called EMS. Well, that's pretty hollow when EMS was never even directed to her. That was Sergeant Kay's responsibility to get them to her, and she did not do so. That's basically it. I would say that, mentioning other things and another incidents with another alleged incident with another officer where, this officer did something bad here and he didn't get in trouble. Well, that's kind of like my grandmother used to tell me. When you start pointing fingers at somebody else, there's three of them pointing right back at you. And that's what that is. That's to try to get you off on a diversion. Oh, don't think about what I did. Don't think about the fact that I was punching her down on the ground while she's handcuffed. Think about this other officer who, back in 2006, pulled the guy out of the car with a gun in his hand. She wants you to, that's a diversion. That's not relevant to this. The determination to be made here today is, did Sergeant Kay violate the policy on this night? I think it's clear that she did. You'll have instructions that'll be given to you about assault. The mayor has said he's thrown one of the charges out. There is a fourth-degree assault charge, which we believe there was no question that she intentionally hit her. There's no question about that. She admitted it. We believe that the commission of that assault violates those policies that are stated as stated in the charges. We also believe the policy was violated by not obtaining the medical care for her. I'm not trying to make this out to be Rodney King. I never said anything about Rodney King, but I don't know really what that has to do with it. But I would just say Rodney King wasn't in handcuffs either. And I know that was a totally different situation. That was a totally different thing. There were multiple officers involved in that. That doesn't really have anything to do with this at all. You know the facts. You heard them from Sergeant Kay herself. She admits to the factual basis constituting the charges. The factual basis is striking the handcuffed prisoner down on the ground and failing to get medical care for him after she had called EMS. Again, the standard of proof is low here. It's by a preponderance of the evidence. You just have to believe more likely than not did that occur. I would submit to you that it's beyond any doubt that it occurred because, in fact, Sergeant Kay testified to it herself. She's admitted to it. She just says that she didn't do anything wrong. That's That's what she says. So, again, you know, as far as her being a threat, she says, well, I was threatened, I was in fear. Again, you all can use your common sense. There's a drunk, belligerent person handcuffed down on the ground and they're kicking, and Officer Kay's afraid of her. She wasn't afraid of her. She was mad. To use her own words, it had been a long day. She'd worked a long shift. She was tired of Payne Street or tired of Christy Gammon, whichever one you want to. She didn't want to be down there, and she lost all patience. That's her words. Nobody put those words in her mouth. She lost all patience. Again, if somebody spit on me, I'd be upset too. I'd lose my patience. But I'm not a police officer. I'm not held to that higher standard. They are. When you put on that uniform, when you take the responsibility of being a law enforcement officer, you have to hold yourself to a higher standard. You can't lose patience when somebody spits on you. I'm sorry, that's nasty. I know it's gross, but that happens. It happens to police officers all the time. It is never an appropriate response to beat a handcuffed prisoner that spits on you. It's just not. So I'm asking that you find her guilty of all of the charges. And again, I appreciate your attention to this.
Thank you. And I understand that Mr. Harmon's not back yet, but he has making the corrections that both of you guys have agreed on the instructions.
Well, except for the objections I made earlier.
Okay. Are there any?
At some point, you've already overruled my objections, but for what's going to be instructed, we have essentially approved the form. There were some things that were deleted that I asked to have deleted that.
Which I didn't agree to, but were deleted, so that is what it is.
Okay.
I just don't want it to appear
There was a
that I
powwow going on, but
agreed
I was
to
there.
it.
I don't.
Okay.
Basically, what
Thank
he
you,
did
Mayor.
was he's taken the factual basis out of the instructions. But I think the commission's well aware of what I submit the factual basis is for the violation. So
I think they can figure it out.
We'll work hard to figure it out. We will retire to lunchroom to do our deliberation, but we'll have to move to go into a closed session. If Ms. Schaller, if you'll read the motion, please.
Closed session pursuant to KRS 618-10-1F for the purpose of discussions which might lead to the discipline or dismissal of an individual employee without restricting that employee's right to a public hearing if requested, and pursuant to KRS 618-10-1J, deliberations of a judicial or quasi-judicial bodies regarding individual adjudications or appointments at which neither the person involved, her representatives, nor any other individual not a member of the agency's governing body or staff is present, but not including any meetings of the planning commissions, zoning commissions, or board of adjustments.
Motion by Waltrip, second by Hills. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Denning.
Yes.
Hill.
Yes.
Waltrip.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes. I don't know how long we'll be. I'll let you know. Okay, we're back in open session. At the risk of not drawing any of this out, there are 8 counts that were remaining by a majority vote of the commission. All counts have been found not guilty. You'll be returned to. I'm sorry. On all 8 of them.
I mean, well, if they're all unanimous and stuff,
They're not unanimous.
okay. I still think probably I'll go through each count, roll call vote.
Unless there's an objection from Mr. Milliken, then we'll just let it go as is.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mayor.
We're going to let it
Still
go as
gonna have
is.
a roll call?
No, we're finished.
Hold on just a second. Hold on. If you all are advising that we should have a roll call vote to
I
make,
think we should, I think we need a roll call vote.
I may just keep it, I mean, I think you can do a roll call vote. I suppose that it was by a majority of the commission. I don't know that you have to have an individual vote, but
would that work?
I'd like to understand.
Why?
Because you still have to have, we can't just have a decision coming out and saying, well, by a majority vote, we do this. I mean, this is still a vote by each individual person. And still for the record, I think we need to have a decision of each person on each county.
The attorney said
Well, let
we
me-
should have it now.
we have no objection. We understand you've reached a conclusion there were no violations on all counts.
That's correct.
I have no objection to that. If Mr. Milliken doesn't have an objection, then he can't.
We got open meetings issue we got to be concerned about.
I understand.
But I think it is acceptable, Mr. Harmon, and correct me if I'm wrong, and you know much more about it than I do, but I think that they can vote and acknowledge that they have reached a majority on each one. Only one person is required, I suppose, to sign on a verdict form like the four-person. So I'll leave that to counsel for the city.
I'll have to do that for what the city says.
Which my belief and opinion, you need to go through each decision of the 8 decisions and do a roll call vote on each one, because we have open meetings issues.
All right, on decision number one, you got your sheets out. On decision number one, which is the third page back, we find that Sergeant K did not violate KRS 508030 assault 4th degree. Mr. Denning? Did not violate is a yes vote.
Yes.
Can we have a motion in a second on each of these charges?
So moved.
Second.
How much we need a motion?
I don't think we need a motion and second because we entered these charges in the beginning. So on the did not violate KRS 508030 assault 4th degree, Mr. Denning, the yes vote is did not violate.
Yes.
Ms. Hill?
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Yes.
That passed 4-1? Correct. And decision number 2, which is page 6, we find that Sergeant K did not violate KRS 431025, which is unnecessary force. A yes vote is that we find that Sergeant K did not violate that. Joe?
Yes.
Yes.
No?
No.
Yes.
That passed 3-2. Instruction number 3, which is 503090, which provides that justifiable physical force upon the defendant. We find that Sergeant K did not violate KRS 503090. A yes vote is a did not violate. Joe?
Yes.
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Yes.
Now we go into the policy decisions, which is decision number 4. We find that Sergeant K did not violate Bouldering Police Department policy 2.10.2.2.8, which is conformance of law. The did not violate is a yes vote.
Yes.
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Yes.
Decision number 5, we find that Sergeant K did not violate Bouldering Police Department policy 2.10.2.2.31, truthfulness. A yes vote is did not violate.
Yes.
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Yes.
Decision number 6, we find that Sergeant K did not violate Bouldering Police Department policy 2.10.2.233, which is unsatisfactory performance. A yes vote is a did not violate.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No. Decision number 7, we find that Sergeant K did not violate Bowling Police Department Policy 2.10.2.2.37, which is use of force, more force than necessary. A yes vote is did not violate.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
And decision number 8, we find that Sergeant K did not violate Bowling Police Department Policy 4.3.24.2, which is special transport on injured prisoner seeking medical assistance. A yes vote is did not violate.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
That concludes all of our, are there any other issues that we need to take up before we close the meeting? Matter's closed. Thank you for tuning in.